Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebekah Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom.
In our top story, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has warned that if the remaining hostages held by Hamas are not freed by the time he takes office, there will be all hell to pay. President Trump demanded the immediate return of 100 hostages who have been held by the Iranian-backed terror group in Gaza for over a year. He said if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, the date that I assume office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East and for those who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity. He warned that those responsible will be hit harder than anybody in the long and storied history of the United States of America.
The Hezbollah terror group is using the ceasefire with Israel to restock, rearm, and rebuild its terror infrastructure in Lebanon. A source close to the Iranian proxy army told the Washington Post that Hezbollah views the ceasefire as an opportunity. It will allow Iran to take stock of its losses in Lebanon and attempt to rebuild what was once its strongest proxy in the region. The Israeli Defense Force estimates that over 3,000 Hezbollah terrorists have been killed in fighting, and the IDF troops inflicted major damage on Hezbollah's terror infrastructure and resources. Hezbollah's senior leadership has been wiped out, leaving the jihadi militants in disarray.
The IDF has discovered evidence that Hezbollah was planning to deploy chemical weapons against Israeli troops in Lebanon. Israel's Walla News Service reported that IDF soldiers found gas masks, chemical materials, and sedatives at Hezbollah outposts. It stated that the evidence proves that Hezbollah intended to use chemical weapons as a cover to abduct Israeli soldiers and civilians. More than 150 Israelis have been killed and hundreds have been injured by Hezbollah over the past year. In addition, 80,000 Israelis have been forced to evacuate their homes.
Several members of the British Broadcasting Corporation have resigned from the National Union of Journalists after they were instructed to display solidarity with Palestinians. Union officials directed BBC staff to wear keffiyehs and Palestinian colors as symbols of resistance on air and on social media. Dozens of BBC employees resigned from the union. One journalist berated the organization for creating a hostile environment for Jews. The Board of Deputies accused the trade unions of playing student politics on a conflict whose facts they appear to be ignorant of.
The leaders of the Palestinian Authority's ruling Fatah party met with the heads of Hamas in Cairo to discuss which terror group will govern Gaza after the war. The feuding factions reportedly agreed to form a committee to run post-war Gaza. The Palestinian Authority ruled the Gaza Strip until Hamas staged a bloody coup in 2007, forcefully removing the PA from the coastal enclave. Now PA and Hamas leaders are demanding that the corrupt Palestinian government in Ramallah once again resume control of Gaza. Israel has insisted that it will not allow Hamas to have any role in Gaza's future. It also distrusts Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas, who continues to incite Arab violence against Jews and pays monthly stipends to the families of terrorists.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul ordered that American flags be lowered to half-mast following the announcement of the death of American-Israeli Omer Natura. It was believed the 21-year-old IDF tank platoon commander from Oyster Bay, New York, was taken hostage by Hamas into Gaza on October 7, 2023. Unfortunately, new intelligence has led IDF officials to determine that Natura was killed on that fateful day and his lifeless body was taken into the Gaza Strip. Governor Hochul said, "For months we had been praying for the safe return of Omer and all those kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th. The news of his death has shaken all New Yorkers to our core."
U.S. President Joe Biden was seen with an anti-Israel propaganda book. The 100 Years' War on Palestine, a history of settler colonial conquest from 1917 until 2017, was written by Lebanese-American author Rashidi Khalidi. It falsely claims that the Palestinian population of Israel was colonized and forced to relinquish their homeland to the Jews. The book also praises Palestinian violence against Jews as popular resistance against oppression. The president was Black Friday shopping with his family in Nantucket when he was photographed exiting a bookstore with the anti-Semitic book.
In archaeological news, an Israeli girl discovered a 3,500-year-old Egyptian amulet while hiking in central Israel. Daphne Filsteiner was enjoying a family outing near Hod HaSharon when she came across the ancient artifact adorned with etchings of a dung beetle. The family immediately contacted the Israel Antiquities Authority, who explained that ancient Egyptians considered this insect a sacred symbol of new life. The IAA said scarab amulets found in Israel are evidence of Egyptian rule in our region 3,500 years ago.
Thousands of Christians and Jews gathered in Amsterdam last week to express their support for Israel. The event was organized by Christian Zionists and Jews and sent a strong message of solidarity with the Jewish people and Israel. 1 month ago, Israeli soccer fans were the victims of an anti-Semitic pogrom in Amsterdam, where mobs ambushed and brutally attacked Jews and Israelis in the Dutch capital after a match. Frank Van Oort, the director of Christians for Israel, co-organized the event entitled Together Against Jew Hatred. He said, "We see the attempts to blame the Jews for violence against them, and we are sick of it. We are standing by the Jews, and we will not stand by as hatred is incited against them."
The Sanhedrin Rabbinical Court in Jerusalem has ruled that all Jews must come home to Israel. The highly influential panel of rabbis recorded their ruling in Hebrew, English, French, Spanish, and Yiddish so that all Jews would hear the call to return to the land of their forefathers as prophesied in the Bible. They said Jews have an obligation detailed in the Torah to live in the land of Israel, and that now is the time to come home.
Member of Knesset and of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, Amit Halevi, addressed a forum of the European Parliament in Belgium last week. The conference, entitled The Iranian Regime's Security Implications for Europe and Israel, included members of the European Parliament, policy experts, and representatives from civil society. Participants were briefed on the growing threat posed by the Iranian regime and its destabilizing influence on both Israeli and European security. Panel discussions were held on Israel's efforts to counter Iran's actions within international institutions and the pressing need to designate Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its proxies across Europe as terrorist organizations. Halevi, an expert in foreign policy and security, briefed the forum on Israel's strategies to confront Iran's nuclear ambitions and the growing influence of Iranian-backed terror groups in Europe. Josh Reinstein, the president of the Israel Allies Foundation, said, "The Iranian regime is not only a threat to Israel, but to the entire Western world. Its pursuit of nuclear weapons and support for terrorism has destabilized the region and jeopardized global security."
The president of Paraguay, Santiago Peña, will be in Israel this week to formally reopen his country's embassy in Jerusalem, the undivided capital of Israel. In 2018, Paraguay became the third country to move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, following the United States and Guatemala. Later, Honduras and Papua New Guinea moved their diplomatic missions to the Israeli capital. Unfortunately, a change of leadership in Paraguay led to a decline in friendly relations with Israel and the closing of its embassy in Jerusalem just 5 months after it was opened. Santiago Peña campaigned on the promise to restore Paraguay's relationship with Israel and reopen the Jerusalem embassy. He will address the Israeli Knesset on Wednesday, and on Thursday, the embassy will officially reopen in Jerusalem.
The Knesset Christian Allies Caucus has named member of Knesset Moshe Turpaz as its new co-chair. This massively influential caucus includes 18 members of the Knesset from 6 different political parties. Turpaz, a long-standing member of the KCAC, will replace MK Shireen Haskel, who stepped down after being appointed Deputy Foreign Minister. Turpaz released a statement describing the pivotal role the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus has played in fostering stronger relations between Israel and the Christian world. He said that he is honored to serve as co-chair of the KCAC alongside member of Knesset Yuli Edelstein.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and I'm here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Rabbi Josh Wander. He is the founder of itstimetoleave.com. Rabbi Wander, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So tell a little bit about what is itstimetoleave.com.
So it's an organization that promotes the ingathering of the exiles, which is basically bringing all the Jewish people back to their ancestral homeland.
You've been working on this for a long time. You have several domain names. You were the first to come up with Bring Them Home. It wasn't about the hostages. It was about bringing home Jews to Israel. Why is this so important?
Well, we believe that in the end of days, which we're in right now, is one of the primary aspects of the end of days is trying to bring all the Jews back to their homeland. Because while they're here in their homeland, they have the most power to influence the world. And we're meant to be a light into the nations. And in order to be a light into the nations, we need to be all united in our national homeland.
In the last year, we've witnessed incredible miracles come to pass. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Many people look at what's been happening since the beginning of the war in a very negative way, because obviously, what happened on October 7th and subsequently has the tens of thousands of missiles that have been launched towards Israel has been primarily looked at in a negative way. And I can understand that. I'll give you an example, Josh. We were at Sabbath, on Shabbat, we were on a rooftop in the Old City. And all of a sudden, we're watching as a rocket comes by, no siren, explodes right above the Kiddush, right above where we're sitting. Everybody looks, and they start clapping, and then they continue on eating. It happens to be that I had a guest with me, and he was from Long Island, New York. And he was in charge of security in his synagogue. So I asked him, what would happen in Long Island if a rocket came down and exploded above this outdoor event that you're having? What would be the response? And he immediately said there would be pandemonium, and people would be hysterical, they'd be crying, they'd be screaming, they'd be running in every direction. I said, look at the difference. I said, here in Israel, we're so used to the miracles happening that we look and we see the fireworks. We all appreciate what's going on, and we continue on eating because we understand that God is protecting us all. So we have a very different outlook on things than perhaps those that are abroad.
Jews and Christians are coming together in excitement for what God's doing in Israel, but there's a lot of concern on the other side. We just visited in Shiloh the red heifers, and they mentioned that one of the reasons Hamas actually attacked is because we brought red heifers to Israel. They were worried about the Third Temple.
I was actually introduced on a radio show as being the impetus for October 7th because I was involved in the Red Heifer Project. So because the Hamas spokesman said that, I was somehow blamed for what happened, which I thought was humorous. But there are a lot of projects happening. If you spoke to somebody a mere 70, 80 years ago and told them that soon there's going to be an ingathering of the exiles, that there's going to be a rebuilding of Jerusalem, they would look at you like you're insane. Today we're living with these miracles unfolding before our eyes, and most people are not aware of what they're seeing. That's what there was a famous rabbi known as the Vilna Gaon, and he said on the verse in the Torah that says that Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. So he said in the end of days, when the redemption is unfolding, people are just like in that verse, people are just going to be oblivious to what's going on around them. They're not going to see the redemption. And we're living in a time where the redemption is literally unfolding before our eyes, and most people are not aware of what they're seeing. I like to quote from the book of Ezra. It says that 42,360 Jews returned from Babylon in order to rebuild the Second Temple. On an average day in Ben Gurion Airport, it facilitates 50,000 people. On a peak day, it's 100,000. That means in one day, we're able to bring back more Jews than the entire return of the Babylonian exile. People just don't realize the enormity of what they're seeing.
It's really unbelievable to see not just people understanding what God is doing in Israel, but a real revival of Judaism. We're seeing that the number one need in the army is tzitzit or tefillin. We're seeing people, secular people, sending the Parshat Shavua, the Torah portion, to show how it lines up with what's happening. What do you think this is leading towards?
I think it's even more amazing than what you're describing, because I think that there are many commandments in the Torah that are written in the Bible that have just been neglected over thousands of years of exile. There are 613 commandments according to our tradition. Some of them only apply to certain people. They apply to a man or a woman or a priest or a Levite. Some of them apply only in specific times when we have a temple, for example. But there are many commandments in the Torah that have just been neglected over thousands of years of exile. And one of those I wrote a book about, which is the commandment of the silver trumpets. In the time of war, in the time of trouble, the book of Numbers says that you're supposed to bring these silver trumpets out from the temple, and you're supposed to blow them. And I have a set that I actually have brought to the battlefields in Lebanon, in Gaza, and we blow these silver trumpets. It gives a lot of, empowers the soldiers, and they understand that they're now starting to do something that hasn't been done for 2,000 years.
Rabbi Wander, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Well, if you spoke to somebody, like I said, a mere 80 years ago, and they said that the redemption is unfolding, they would look at you like you're insane. Today, for the first time in 2,000 years, you have dozens of families of priests that are living in and around the old city of Jerusalem with the temple garments inside their closets ready to do the temple service. You have many institutions that are studying the temple service in order to teach them. And we have rebuilt all of the vessels of the temple. We are literally sitting at the edge of the rebuilding of the temple. We are involved in rebuilding that temple, and it's going to happen very, very soon, sooner than anybody can imagine. So stay tuned, because we're in for some very exciting times.
Thank you, Rabbi Wander, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now, the truth from Zion.
Today, the Ottoman Empire is known as Turkey. Following World War I, the so-called War to End All Wars, victorious Allied powers, France, Great Britain, the United States, Russia, Italy, and Japan, decided the fate of the former territories of the Ottoman Empire. On the other side stood Germany and Austria-Hungary. The Allies wanted to dismantle the defeated Ottoman Empire, as it had aligned itself closely with Germany. People don't often think much about the origins of borders in the Middle East. It was only a century ago that these countries were established as we know them today. It all happened at the San Remo Conference that took place in April of 1920. This pivotal moment shaped the future of the Middle East. The diplomatic gathering in the city of San Remo, Italy, laid the groundwork for serious territorial and political changes for Israel and the entire Middle East region. Prime ministers from Great Britain and France participated in this large-scale event, along with representatives from Japan, Greece, and Belgium. During the conference, 2 mandates were endorsed, separating the territories of the old Ottoman province. The northern sections, which became today's Syria and Lebanon, were under the authority of France, while the southern half was to be called Palestine and was mandated to Great Britain, which also had control of what is now known as Iraq. The idea was to offer these countries independence while being under a temporary, already established power. During the conference, leaders redefined borders and the way certain areas in the region would be governed, resulting in a new order. The new countries were told they would be supported until ready to govern themselves. Of course, not everyone agreed with this decision. For example, King Faisal of Damascus, the capital of Syria, opposed the French mandate. In response, the French army threw him out of the country by force. The League of Nations split the former Ottoman Empire into nation-states that had never existed before. Today, you would recognize them as Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel. We don't question their legitimacy now, but in 1920, the borders for these countries had just been carved out. The conference recognized the principle of self-determination acknowledging different ethnic groups in the Middle East and trying to realize their aspirations for statehood. Nevertheless, many tribes and peoples were separated by these newly created borders. Aside from establishing areas for groups to live and self-govern, the San Remo Conference also provided a dialogue to discuss the creation of the modern State of Israel. The Balfour Declaration was written 3 years before the conference on November 2, 1917. Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary at the time, declared in writing that His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Even though the document had been written, no action was taken during those 3 years. However, at the San Remo Conference, the doctrine was reviewed and endorsed by the powerful dignitaries in the room. The San Remo Conference is responsible for much of what we see as the Middle East today. Michael Oren, Israel's former ambassador to the United States and a former member of the Knesset, believes the San Remo Conference was pivotal in the creation of the State of Israel.
San Remo Conference was crucial because it represented, for the first time, international recognition, of the existence of a Jewish people, not Jewish religion, but a Jewish people, and a Jewish people endowed with an inalienable right to self-determination in our homeland. That recognition is not in the UN Partition Resolution of 1947. It's not in the Camp David Accords of 1979. It's certainly not in the Oslo Accords of 1993. That recognition of a Jewish people that has a right to self-determination in our homeland that is embedded now in international law.
By this time in 1920, the League of Nations had existed for about 5 months, and it played a significant role in assigning territories west of the Jordan River to Great Britain. That area is called Judea and Samaria and clearly marked within the borders of Israel, although the international community continues to falsely call these areas the West Bank. The legacy of the San Remo Conference highlights the intricacies of post-war diplomacy and the delicate balance between the interests of global superpowers. But for Jews, it was the recognition of the Jewish people, not just as a religion, but also as a nation. Even so, people who study the Bible have known about the nation of Israel for thousands of years before this conference took place. Up next, the ICEJ Report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Since Israel was brutally attacked by Hamas on October 7th of last year, the demand for mental health care in Israel has surged. This is especially true for those suffering with some form of post-traumatic stress. Israeli experts are estimating that 1 in 3 individuals impacted by the conflict will grapple with trauma symptoms for years to come.
Since 1980, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem has been a voice of Christian support for Israel and connected the global church to the land of the Bible. Headquartered in Jerusalem, the ICEJ has taken action to stand with Israel by caring for Holocaust survivors, helping Jewish families return home to Israel, providing bomb shelters, fighting anti-Semitism around the world, and by inviting Christians to discover Israel for themselves.
Over the past year, the Christian Embassy has responded to this urgent need by supporting a variety of trauma therapy programs, most notably for emergency first responders and for children. One such initiative is a new recovery home we funded in the Galilee that serves as a haven for those experiencing acute trauma symptoms. The home is now self-supporting and uses creative therapy methods to help people find their balance in life more quickly. Elsewhere, we have sponsored therapeutic horseback riding sessions, as well as therapeutic group retreats for emergency and medical first response teams. The ICEJ recently bought 2 therapy horses, which service many recovering youths and have proven quite successful. A young boy named Erez was held hostage in Gaza for 50 days and managed to survive mentally by remembering his times riding his favorite horse. After his release, Erez was so glad to be back on a horse again. The ICEJ also sponsored special training courses for medical professionals dealing with severely injured patients and Jewish-Arab tensions in the workplace. We also helped to fund renovations of a new trauma recovery center in Jerusalem, as well as provided large protected rooms for group therapy sessions in a resilience center in the south of Israel. These are just some of the ways the Christian Embassy has been helping Israelis overcome the trauma of this difficult war.
After Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, the ICEJ has been actively standing with Israel and her people through advocacy and urgently needed aid projects. Now is the time for Christians to turn their love for Israel and the Jewish people into real action as never before. Your donation will help deliver bomb shelters to at-risk areas, provide necessary supplies for first responders, support affected citizens with trauma care, and will eventually help rebuild these devastated communities. Visit ICEJUSA.tv to donate online or call 1-800-910-6355 and give your generous gift today.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebekah Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.